Hello and welcome to the Headache Doctor podcast, where on this podcast, it's our mission to educate and empower everyone with headaches and migraines so that you can break free from a life of fear of your next headache or migraine and dependence on medication. In today's podcast, we have a special guest. This is a patient who's successfully gone through our process here at Novera Headache Center, someone who heard about us, who is out of state, who flew here, and has gone through our treatment process, has an amazing story, and we wanted to share that story with you, the listeners. So this is Stein, and he is from Holland, Michigan. Thank you, Stein, so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Stein, so what we want to do, your story has obviously some unique elements to it, but what we want to do is capture what I think are consistencies between what you've experienced and what others have experienced. But let's start off with you telling us how it all started, because kind of had a crazy beginning. So go ahead and tell us where this all began.
Yeah, indeed, it was a crazy beginning. I was actually going that day. I was going to do a mountain bike race, and so I had gone outside. In the driveway, I turned out to be attacked by two pit bulls that lives in the neighborhood, and I got cut up pretty bad. My arm was not pretty to look at. I had a lot of very deep cuts and marks and tears. But it turned out that in a few days that I had gotten some very bad neck injuries in this situation. So that's how the whole thing started.
Yeah, so you've got these two pit bulls. One of them's like pulling on your arm, and then obviously the wound was to your forearm.
Correct.
But then you're realizing like, oh, the injury actually was also sustained in the neck and then the shoulder.
Yes. So during the time when I was fighting with the pit bulls, I ended up blowing two discs in my neck. I was not aware of that until later on that week that I had sustained very definite injuries to my neck.
Yeah. Okay. So where does the journey go from there? You've got this injury. Yeah. How do they end up treating it? What do you end up doing from there?
Yeah. So at first, I think I ran into somewhere along the line. We did a lot of imaging to figure out what was going on and why I had this neck pain. And someone that was analyzing the imaging made a mistake and said that he's going to heal up just fine. It's going to take care of itself. Turned out not to be the case. So I had to chase down a few more doctors. And once I got to a surgeon, he immediately saw the completely collapsed vertebrae or the disc, and he told me very much that I should have had surgery already, and I needed to get into surgery as soon as possible.
Yikes. Okay, so you get into surgery. What did that change as far as symptoms and what you were feeling?
So following surgery, I absolutely felt better. I could start to go about my day more normally. But I still had a lot of pain, and I assumed that was a lot of just pain from surgery. So I kind of moved forward the best I could, assuming that everything was going to be better soon. The better soon didn't really happen the way that I was expecting. It turned out that the first surgery ended up failing. I had to have a second surgery to repair the first surgery. And then still a while past that, there was a third surgery before the neck was actually held together properly. So I ended up with 3 surgeries.
Yeah, and what types of surgeries were these? What were they doing?
So they had to fuse across 2 vertebrae. The disc in between was collapsed and broken. So I was having the was referred to as the nucleus pulpus, was leaking out and pushing on my nerves. And that's where a lot of the pain was coming from.
Yeah. That's the jelly of the donut.
Correct.
Yeah.
The jelly of the donut.
What were your symptoms during this time?
A lot of headaches, which I refer to as headaches. I know better now, but to me, they were headaches. And they consistently started in the neck. And I eventually realized that a lot of it actually starts in the kind of upper part of my shoulder. I can feel it there first. And then I would have pain in the neck. And, my pain spot would be right on the bones right here. And I think a lot of listeners would actually kind of recognize the fact that it's like, yeah, that's where I end up with pain.
Yeah, like right at the base of the skull.
Right at the base of the skull.
Yep.
That's right. And that was intense. And I learned that if I can't figure out how to get rid of that, very soon I'm going to have pain right in the forehead. And in my case, it literally hit kind of on the eyebrow right here. And then a little while later, I would have it on the other side as well. At that point in time, it's painful enough. I really couldn't do much. My go-to at that point in time would be, I got to try to find a place where where there's as little light as possible, as quiet as possible. And if I'm fortunate, I can fall asleep, and hopefully when I wake up, I feel better.
What was the frequency of this? Were you dealing with these symptoms daily?
Close to daily. Over a 3-month period, I would tend to average out somewhere between 4 and 5 migraines, days that I really don't function well per week. So 4 to 5. That means that sometimes it could be 7, sometimes it could be really good and only have 3 migraines in a week.
Wow. So you went through these 3 surgeries, your neck is now fused, and you're saying there wasn't any long-term relief to these symptoms.
Correct. The only thing that got better was the actual pain that radiated from pushing on the nerves in the neck, but all the other symptoms and all the other pain was still there.
Okay. So following these surgeries, were there other avenues that you went down to try to relieve this?
That's right. So the first thing we tried was my surgeon that did my 2nd and 3rd surgery said, we're going to give you injections in the neck. And for the next year or so, I was doing monthly injections in the neck, which helped a little bit. And it helped most right in the beginning, but then slowly it was fading. It was not as helpful anymore, but it only helped a little bit. I was clamoring for anything to make it better. So even just a little bit felt like, okay, this is better. But I was still dealing with close to the same number of migraines. And so, the answer is I was slightly better from dealing with it.
As far as medication, you were on medication throughout this time?
Right. So my surgeon was the one that was saying, hey, we need to do these injections. My personal doctor started treating me with a number of other medications and he was actually quite concerned about me falling into depression and anxiety because of the amount of time I spent being in pain. So he prescribed medication that should help with anti-inflammatories. He wanted to have something directly for migraine pain. My heart rate had shot up a little bit, so he says we need to do something not heart rate, my blood pressure had shot up. So he says I'd like to have something in there, and I can do a medicine here that can help with both the migraines and keeping your blood pressure under control. Okay. So there was a lot of medication.
Yeah. What was the impact on your life throughout this season?
I maybe should just kind of throw in a little thing that my son said at that point in time. So I'm teaching college at Hope College, and I want to throw out too. So to all of my former students, thanks for being my students and for hanging in there with me during a time that I was very much struggling with pain. And if you know people that have migraines, send this on to all of your friends. So my son and my wife actually conveyed this to me later. He came home one day and said to my wife, Dad gives every bit of effort he has to his classes. And when he comes home, there's simply nothing left for us. I felt like a failure as far as being a husband. I felt like a failure as far as being a dad, which is very hard. It's still hard to admit, but I definitely, that's what it was. But I also knew that I had to keep my job. So I threw every bit of effort into trying to do my job at that point in time. So that's honestly, that's how I felt.
Yeah. So you were able to push through, but you came home and you just had nothing left in the tank.
Correct. Attempt to get ready for tomorrow, try to get as much sleep as possible. And that was the that's how I functioned.
So how long did this go on?
Too long. So eventually, going back to the medication again, the doctor that was giving me injections had just gotten a new nurse. And the new nurse, we'll call her Sally, looked at me one day and she said, "You don't have headaches, you have migraines. There's a difference, but we're treating it wrong." And then she said, wait a second. She ran out of the room. She came back and she said, "We have been given some Botox for free. And if you'd like to, we'd like to give it to you because it should treat this better." So, and it did. It did actually work. I accepted that Botox that day, and it did actually help. That's the first time that I've kind of felt like legitimately I have something that helps for a little bit longer period of time. So that was a big relief.
Yeah.
Insurance company said you have to have a neurologist to administer Botox. So I had to find a neurologist, found one right in Holland. Wonderful gal. And so I switched from the one doctor that had given the injections to now a neurologist that was giving me Botox every 3 months. That continued for several years. And the Botox was the one thing that helped. But eventually I started to notice it is not helping as much anymore. It was decreasing in its efficiency at helping me. But I think Botox brought me from averaging 4 to 5 migraines a week to probably, it depends, but I could have a week that could have 2 migraines.
Sure.
Which was like awesome. But
Yeah.
most of them were probably hovering around 4.
And then at some point, your work had to change, right?
Correct.
It couldn't continue. Yeah.
Correct.
Tell us about that transition.
So it happened kind of in 2 stages. The first stage was one of my colleagues, and thank you, Dr. Nordheis, for actually pushing this, he advocated for me to be able to work at 75% instead of 100%, which was much needed. I tended to feel really guilty working at less because that means somebody else in the department had to kind of cover part of my job. This was kind of rough. I didn't want that to happen. So then I decided I'm going to go back to 100%. I think I can handle it. I only lasted 2 more years. And I said, this is it. I can't keep doing it. So I retired very early. Not when I was intended to, but when tank was empty.
Yeah.
I said, I gotta be done.
Yeah. So when it sounds like we're approaching the point when you start to hear, of Novera.
Yes.
And what was that like? I mean, who told you about us? How did you hear about us? And what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so this is where the story changes to I get a call it's a God thing. So a church that my wife and I had been at one point in time had the pastor was Dr. Pitzenberger. So I want to spill the beans. That's your father-in-law.
Yeah.
And so an absolutely wonderful person. We were talking, and he informed me of the fact that you had just started, if I understand this quite right, you had just started the headache clinic. Silly me, I did nothing with it. A lot of the reason why I didn't do things was I'm exhausted all the time from migraines.
Right.
It's very hard to live with. So I didn't do anything with it. I want to take a big jump right there. And I say that about 2 months and 2 weeks ago, so about 10 weeks ago-ish, my wife left me a note, and she had written down, contact Novera. I didn't do that day. She comes home from work. She asked me if I had contacted you, and it's like, no, I have not. And I probably started excusing the fact that I had a migraine. The next day, I went into a hardware store close by where we live, and I don't remember what I'm shopping for, like picking up nails or screws. And in walks, our old minister, Pitzenberger. And he walks up to me and he said, Stein, is that your Land Cruiser out there? And
that's right.
And I laugh, and it's like, yeah. So for a few minutes we talk about Land Cruisers because he has recently gotten a couple, and he tells me that he actually drove by the hardware store. He had no reason to be there. He happened to see a Land Cruiser in a parking lot, old Land Cruiser, and he turned around, came back, came inside because he wanted to meet whoever drove the Land Cruiser. It turned out to be me.
He went back and went into the store just to meet who was driving the Land Cruiser. That's awesome. Yeah,
whoever was driving the Land Cruiser. So maybe for a minute we talked Land Cruiser, and then we switched over to, how are we doing and how are the families, and we ended up back on the migraine thing. And he asked me if I had contacted you. And I had to admit, no, I hadn't. And he said, you got to. And there's maybe more details, but it's really, the God thing is my wife is pushing me really hard. I haven't called next day. This happened. And I've never heard of anybody that drive past a hardware store, happen to see a car in the parking lot and turn around and go back to figure out who drives it.
Yeah.
So we both laughed. I think we prayed, and I went home and contacted you guys, and realizing that this is, if God is pushing this, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to contact and figure out what you guys can help me, how you can help me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know some of the details there. And I really enjoy the fact that my father-in-law saw a Land Cruiser and couldn't help but go find out who drives it. And for context, I mean, Holland, Michigan is a pretty small town, so I could understand wanting to know who's in the Land Cruiser community because you're both very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And but what an amazing story. So, yeah, you reach out to us. Obviously, you're in Michigan and we're in Colorado. And so I want to get inside your head as far as like what you took away from those initial conversations and what was going through your head and thinking like, maybe along the lines of, I mean, were you hopeful? And if so, why? Mm-hmm. After all you've been through, like, why would there be some hope there type of thing?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was obviously just get on the website. I realized that I could actually sign up for a half an hour with you, where we would actually talk, and you would listen to the story, and let me know if you thought you could be helpful in my particular situation. I think we organized it so that my wife, Jane, would also be at home when I talk to you. And that is important because Jane is often the one that's like saying, hey, we got to get something done here. I got to push this a little bit. And me dealing with pain tended to too often want to just retreat to a dark room. So she was home, and we talked to you. The questions you asked, and I guess your response to me as I was talking, you often knew exactly where I was going because you're so familiar with what happens with people with continuous headaches and migraines. So you could kind of fill in the story at times, where I was going, and you totally understood what I was saying. You also used a lot of the exact same wording that I tend to use when I'm describing my symptoms. It's like the same words, it's the same vocabulary. And I realized that there was like no question in my mind that you really knew, what was going on here. As we finished the conversation, there was a very important second conversation that took place, and that was between Jane and I. We had kind of figured out in our head what it was going to cost to do this, and we knew that it was going to be very expensive. Very expensive can mean so many different things, but it is expensive, but it's also relative to what you have. So since I had retired early, we're thinking, wow, this is a big step. I'm gonna have to go and live in Colorado. You had suggested, like, to really get things done, 8 weeks. So we're thinking, it's like, wow, that's a long time. It's like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? And Jane immediately went to work on it. But we looked at each other, and we said we'd be crazy not to. So I've tried so many things. Nothing has worked, and everybody keeps doing the same thing, is that they're pushing medicine, injections, pills, and you came in with a completely different concept. This is, no, we're going to actually fix what's wrong. We're going to make you whole again, which honestly has been all along kind of my dream, is to be more whole, and to get rid of a lot of the medicine. You had also mentioned some of the drawback of Botox, which I had eventually started realizing that it's not working as well anymore. And I was very anxious to potentially get off of that. I know it's a poison into my body, 4 times a year, 31 injections 4 times a year, which is a lot of poison.
Right.
I wanted very badly to not have to rely on that for the rest of my life. And I knew I wasn't as whole as I potentially could be. I felt that this is a God thing, and we decided that whatever it takes, we're going to try. We're going to make this happen somehow. Yeah, and I'm glad you did. It's interesting to hear your perspective, especially from the first phone call, because our job is really to listen so that we make sure that the patient, that the individual on the other side feels heard. It's an element of our healthcare system, I think, is lacking. Patients feeling heard. Yeah. And it does, we do see patterns and we hear, it's all we do, treat people with headaches and migraines. And so oftentimes people feel like their story is so unique and providers haven't been able to provide answers. Oftentimes, because we see it so often, we are able to communicate in a way that people are surprised by. So it's interesting to hear you provide your perspective there. And the other thing too, so if you're listening to this and you live out of state and you're thinking,
Do I have to come out for 8 weeks? It is a case-by-case basis as far as what we're going to recommend, the length of time that someone may come out for treatment. And so there's a lot of different variables as far as someone's ability to pick up and leave, or how committed to the process they would be, how motivated they are. And so when we hear things like someone's life is on pause, they had to retire early, it's a daily sort of grind, and they've changed as a person. Like, those are things that we really have no problem recommending, let's do this the right way. And so that's what we heard from you, and that's why I was able to say, hey, like, I know this is a bigger commitment, but it feels like we need to just commit. And so, yeah, let's talk about when you came out here. Talk me through treatment and what that felt like and what you experienced.
It's like, almost, where do I start? The first week I knew it was working. I think you were kind of laughing at me after 3 treatments. I came in on day 4, and I said, when do we start getting rid of the medicine? It's like, how, and I think you were like shocked that was my question. And that has turned out to be harder than I thought, to actually get rid of the medicine, but we're like slowly chipping at it. But I can say that I'm no longer taking Botox. I'm no longer giving myself a monthly injection. I have decreased the amount. I still take some medicines, but I decreased the amount. And I'm having no side effects from having done that. In fact, I feel flat out a whole lot better than I was. But yes, after 1 week, going into the first weekend, I knew that this is working. And it was working completely different than any of the drugs that I had previously tried. So it became very clear to me that this might actually work out the way that we prayed, that we had hoped, that you had said it's possible that it can go that way. After week 2, 3, 4, I just kept getting better. Once in a while, you would ask me, it's like, when's the last time you had a migraine? And frequently I would say, so I thought, well, I had one day this last week where a migraine was trying to push through, but it never actually got there. It never became a migraine. I had this early symptoms, from my upper trapezius is when I tend to feel it first. So I had the symptoms there. It might actually go to the base of my skull, but I never actually have it in the forehead. It's just like it kept getting better, and that is still happening. It's like I have not had a migraine for, like a full-on migraine. I haven't had it since I was here. It's been 2 months. And I've had some days when I'm thinking I could get one, but those days I get further and further between. I've tried very hard to exercise on a daily basis, so that I was also helping, and I love being in Colorado Springs with all the hiking and availability of outdoors and stuff here. But overall, it has just kept getting better.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've given up some more of the medicine, and that feels absolutely great overall. And I truly believe that I'm going to go back, that this is not going to be a problem again. If I have minor issues, it would be because I'm not doing my own exercises. I think it's going to be fair to say that if I treat myself right, I'm migraine free after 8 months. I tried for 12 years to do this. It's been 12 years since this started. For 12 years, I tried to do it with medicine, and that did not work. In 2 weeks, you changed it. So,
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I hope, I hope the listener can understand. One way that people describe me, or at least like our organization, is we're passionate about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you hear that on this podcast. And then hearing Stein, like hearing you tell your story, I hope you, the listener, realize like that's why. Because when you have the ability to help someone that has been suffering with debilitating pain for over a decade, has lost their career, and basically like surrendered their role, your role as dad in a sense, and any sort of like of the leisure time and the enjoyment of life and your hobbies, like probably stripped of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're basically walking around as a skeleton of what life used to look like. And so being able to, like, in 2 weeks, take someone and start to see change. Oh man, I'll tell you, like, it motivates me to do whatever I can.
Mm-hmm.
That includes like creating a podcast, like being on social media, giving away those free half-hour sessions so we can talk to people. And the thing that I kick myself in is like, and when we don't have the opportunity to help someone for whatever reason, we always want to get better and understand how we can improve upon that, so that we can help the Stein of maybe 10 years ago, or when you initially hear about us. So, it's, I love what I do, because of stories like yours. Okay. So now you're wrapping up, looking to head back home. And, what are some things you're looking forward to?
Can I throw in like just one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really hoping that some of my old students will see this. I was helping people quite often actually get into physical therapy. So I'm going to throw out kind of a little thing here. It's like there's very few physical therapists that specializes in migraines and headaches.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that Hope students will share this with other Hope students, and it doesn't matter what school you come from, but share it with all the physical therapists, and maybe consider looking into what you're doing here, and consider actually when you get your doctorate of physical therapy, to say, I want to actually do that thing where they help people with migraines and headaches and change their lives around completely, so they don't have to go for, in my case, 12 years. People before me probably like kind of gave up and said, well, this is how it's going to be. Actually, my doctors tended to tell me, it's like, we can give you some medicine, and then you have to adjust to live the way you are, because we can't change it. Well, it turned out that is wrong. You can change it. And I'm just a throw out to all of my former students, to look into this and say, do I want to be one of those people that really change people's lives in a huge way? That's what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Stein. And I appreciate that plug. We are, we're looking to help as many people as we can. So if you're one of those and you'd love to, and this interests you, please reach out. Stein, any other thoughts? Parting words for someone out there that may be, in your shoes and trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next?
I'll tag it to what I just said. So if I'm like encouraging greatly people that are thinking of physical therapy to actually do this, then obviously I believe it works. For me, it's been kind of as life changing to go back as, to much more normal. I have a lot more fun. I'm reading more, etc. So all of those are wonderful things. At this point in time, I only know of Novera that does this specifically. So I would say, if you're thinking about it, then listen to the headache doctor, get some more podcasts in, and then contact Novera. and hear what they have to say, after they ask you the questions. It was very obvious to me that they fully understood what is happening in my life, and they wanted to help. So contact them. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Thanks, Stein. And thank you, the listener, for tuning in. I hope that this is one of the more impactful podcasts for you guys. Stories are powerful. And I know that even though I'm sure I'd be surprised if any of you were also attacked by pit bulls, but the mechanics behind shoulder tension and the neck having a problem leading to the headache and the migraine, that's the foundational part of most people's journey that we're able to help and that our healthcare system overlooks. And so what I want you to do, if this sounds like you, is reach out to us. We can book one of those half-hour free discovery visits virtually or in person if you're local. And then we want to, like Stein said, we want to ask those questions, make sure that you understand what this is, and help you problem solve that you can get your life back. Thank you so much for listening to the Headache Doctor podcast. Please share this episode with anyone you know, especially if you live in Holland, Michigan. It's a small community, so let's start helping people with headaches and migraines in Holland, Michigan. And thank you all for listening. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us continue on this journey as we continue to help people everywhere with headaches and migraines break free from a life of fear of their next headache or migraine and dependence on medication, allowing them to live and really thrive in everything they do. Thanks so much for listening.